Maybe the most interesting move that the Houston Texans made this offseason was when they acquired C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a Super Bowl champion safety with the Philadelphia Eagles, who had 6 picks last year. And all they had to give up to get him was offensive lineman Kenyon Green plus a draft pick swap. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I think, for D'Amico Ryans, for Nick Caserio, and for C.J. Stroud, is the first crazy Houston Texan of this regime. I say crazy with quotation marks around it. This is a guy who pushes buttons. And you could easily tell me right now, Paul, well, hang on. What about Azeez Al-Shaair, who is a habitual line stepper? You've even called him that. There's no denying that. I mean, he got away with punching a guy against the Bears Sunday Night Football. And then you had the Trevor Lawrence incident. But C.J. Gardner-Johnson, over his time in the league, has been known as a bit of a line stepper himself. In 2020, he was fined $5,000 for his involvement in a scuffle with Bears wide receiver Javon Wims, who punched Gardner-Johnson in the helmet after Gardner-Johnson reportedly ripped off Wims' mouthpiece and may have spit on him. In a separate incident during the playoffs against the Bears, Gardner-Johnson and receiver Anthony Miller received unsportsmanlike conduct penalties after getting into a scuffle. Miller was ejected for this. Last year with the Eagles, he was fined $45,000 for 3 different infractions in a game against the Saints, including an illegal hit on Alvin Kamara and 2 instances of taunting. And he was ejected from a game against the Washington Commanders in December of last year after receiving 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties for verbally taunting players. He was fined $45,000 and raised both middle fingers to the crowd as he exited the field. So he definitely marches to the beat of a different drum, if we're putting it politely. He was on The Pivot, the podcast with Ryan Clark, Channing Crowder, and Fred Taylor, and was asked about his reputation and if it maybe is one of the reasons that he's no longer in Philadelphia by Ryan Clark.
It's because of the perception of you being a wild card or crazy or uncontrollable, whatever it is. But your play says Pro Bowl caliber, all pro caliber play. Why aren't you, after winning a championship, 2 times in Philadelphia, bro, 6 picks each of those years, why are you now a Houston Texan and not a Philadelphia Eagle?
Scared of a competitor.
You said they're scared of a competitor?
Yeah, simple as that.
What you mean?
You can't program a dog. Certain dogs, you can't say be a dog and then it's time to go out there.
They're scared of a competitor. You can't program a dog. I like this guy already. I mean, they just won the Super Bowl. They're scared of a competitor. That's why they got rid of him. That's a bit of a reach in my book, but I like the mentality. And Gardner-Johnson went into greater detail. He brought up that game against the Washington Commanders because I think he's of the mindset that Philadelphia had gotten tired of his act, but he feels that his act was a big part of the Eagles getting to where they finally got and knocking off the Chiefs in the Super Bowl this past season.
Let's look at the Washington Commanders game. I got kicked out. I was nowhere near to play. Nowhere near to play. Everybody was fed up with me, and I'm like, if you go back to that play, I celebrated with Reed Blankenship. And I'm getting cursed from head to toe on the sideline and looked at Vic even get on me. I'm like, what did I do? So, you know, people in the box, they call down and they're trying to figure out why am I getting kicked? They was trying to reverse the call because guys come off the sideline. If you watch that game, the game was already heavily. That's what sparked it. Then we had like a little scrum at practice. nothing. It's just offense versus defense. But who's the culprit of it? Me, I guess, because I guess we're competing. When you telling the period is live, you telling us not to compete during a live period, but it's a live period. We competing to get ready for a playoff game. All right, cool. It's like little antic things that, okay, so how you want to play football? Or you want me to be a leader and outspoken, but then you want me to sit back and just, I'm cool with taking the back seat.
I think it's very interesting the way that he framed it at the end. Now, as far as the first part, that incident we were talking about in Washington where he ends up flipping people off as he's ejected from the game. The Eagles were winning this game, by the way. They lost after Gardner-Johnson was ejected. He said he was ejected for nothing, and Reed Blankenship, per him, Gardner-Johnson didn't say anything to the players after the second penalty. Important to note that Reed Blankenship had C.J. Gardner-Johnson at his wedding, so I think Reed Blankenship is probably going to stand up for C.J. Gardner-Johnson against any accusations, no matter what. I think they got a pretty deep friendship there. So take that with a grain of salt. But that last part's interesting. He was too intense during practices leading up to the Super Bowl. I mean, that's exactly what I want to hear. Should be exactly what you want to hear, too. You want to have somebody that comes in here that's going to push boundaries. Because take a look at the Texans locker room right now. You've moved Laramie Tunsil out. Tunsil, not a very intense person, I felt like, as far as a drive to win. I think Laramie Tunsil was focused with what Laramie Tunsil does best, which is do my job and get paid. And hey, you know what? No fault toward it. It's Laramie Tunsil. I don't blame him for having that mentality, but you want to win, you need some people that are going to call themselves dogs, that are actually going to push other people into uncomfortable situations. And who in this locker room does that right now? Maybe C.J. Stroud going into year 3. After that, who? Derek Stingley is quiet. Kamari Lassiter's going into his second year. Will Anderson's young, and he's so positive. It's hard to imagine him doing anything like that. Daniil Hunter is not a man of few words, but is a man that doesn't seem like he is going to get in your face about what you're not doing on a play. And based off of all the accounts that Will Anderson gives us, it sounds like, if anything, Daniil Hunter helps calm Will Anderson down. Outside of Azeez Al-Shaair, it's not really coming from anyone. So now you got an Azeez Al-Shaair in the locker room, along with the C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the locker room. And I'm wondering if this team gets a little bit tougher, if this team gets a little bit scrappier. Because I think you could argue that was missing from them last year. They certainly had the talent. The defense was violent, swarmed to the football, created a lot of problems for some of the best quarterbacks in the game, forced takeaways. There's a lot of things to keep an eye on and say, wow, awesome. But they didn't have a guy like C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the locker room. Now they do, and I'm very curious as to how he's going to fit.